What's up, everybody? You're back with YouTube's favorite couple here, and this week you got Ms Diva Talks.
What's up, y'all?
And you got me right here, Kid JW. And Colliders, we'll talk about another video from our amazing cool dude, company man. It's about a place we all shop at. Some of us actually had a very great time working there.
Whatever.
Their things. They did with company time. So, can you guess what it is? No?
Shut
Run
up.
it.
Kroger is secretly among the biggest, most significant supermarket chains in the United States. As of 2021, they are one of only 26 companies with sales exceeding $100 billion a year, consistently placing them near the top of the Fortune 500 list. The reason you may be surprised to hear that is because this company doesn't just operate Kroger stores. They are actually the owners of over 30 other smaller chains across 35 states. That is 2,800 stores in total, so depending on where you live, there is a decent chance that Kroger is behind one of your local supermarkets. They claim to have 9 million daily customers, so you may be contributing to that large sales figure without even realizing it. Given that they affect so many people on a daily basis, I think it makes sense to talk about them. So for this video, I'm going to take a deeper look into Kroger and talk about how they started, how they grew, and some of the biggest reasons behind their success over the years. The first reason I have has to be the founder himself, Bernard Kroger, because so much of how they operate their business to this day is based on what he created, and my goodness, what an unlikely success story that goes all the way back to the 1800s. His parents were immigrants from Germany who operated a typical dry goods store in Cincinnati, Ohio up until 1873, and that is where things went really bad for the Kroger family. In short, the financial panic of that year, that's what it's called, meant that their customers didn't have much money to spend at their store and they were forced to shut it down. To make matters worse, his father actually died of an illness shortly after, and Bernard Kroger, as a 13-year-old kid, was forced to drop out of school and make money for his family. Initially, he worked as a clerk at a drugstore, he went on to work at a farm, but the significant thing here is that when he was 16 years old, he started selling coffee and tea door to door that eventually evolved into a store called Great Western Tea Company that would further evolve into the Kroger chain that we know today. He started that store with his life savings along with a friend of his, but after a couple of years, he bought out his friend's share and was able to open 4 more of them in the area, becoming one of the first chain stores in the country. I'm already inspired, but truly, what I find to be the most inspirational thing about Bernard Kroger is his confidence. It's exemplified in so many different ways, but what I admire specifically is whenever things were looking doubtful or uncertain, he wouldn't pull back from the situation. He would instead take a risk and get even further involved in it. Early on, he had to deal with a flood and a costly wagon accident that probably would have stopped a less determined person. What I'm looking at is in 1893, there were more economic troubles that hurt the entire industry, but instead of giving up and shutting things down, much like his family had done decades earlier, he doubled down on the situation and used it as an opportunity to buy up some of his struggling competitors. By the end of it, he had grown to 17 stores. A final example would be in 1928, he sold all of his shares of the company for $28 million. Incredible timing because it was right before the stock market crash and the Great Depression. Both were things that greatly devalued those shares after he sold them, but instead of just walking away with his good fortune, he believed in the company so much and the economy in general that he bought back heavily into Kroger. And the fact that he bought back into it potentially helped save things by giving the outside investors much more confidence. I just want to convey that despite dealing with horrible circumstances throughout much of his life, Bernard Kroger
I feel like that's kind of like that was some very illegal shit.
What?
Selling his shares and then buying back into it. But I don't think he did it at the same time though. But that's some genius moves. Sell all your shares.
Exactly.
And then the economy goes downhill and then you invest more into the company. You buy back said shares that you show. That's clutch.
Exactly.
Was incredibly confident in everything he did, and this company would almost certainly not be what it is today otherwise. My second reason behind the success is innovation, and I know it might sound out of place. How innovative can a grocery store possibly be? Well, in this case, extremely innovative. Private labels. You've likely seen these items branded by Kroger. They account for about a quarter of their sales. Well, they started doing this very early on when Bernard's mother started making her special sauerkraut to be sold in his stores. She was from Germany. There was a big German community community in the area, so it all made perfect sense, and it sold really well. Moving on from that, today I think we hear the phrase one-stop shop quite a bit, referring to a store where you could buy a variety of items. The interpretation of the phrase has evolved over the years, but the concept kind of started with Kroger. In 1901, Bernard Kroger took notice of how they were selling a lot of bread, and had the revelation that it would be cheaper and fresher if they simply started making it in the store. It allowed them to sell their bread at half the price of most of their
I get how they were first, because now that I think about it, there used to be bread shops. You had to go to a bread shop to get bread. You had to go to the fish market to get fish. You had to go to the butcher the butcher to get meat. So Kroger basically put it all under one roof as a grocery store.
Like, I gotta go here and there. Man, gas was $5 a gallon. We ain't gonna have no bread or meat tonight.
Their bakery became a big way that they would stand out from everyone else. The following year, he even renamed the company the Kroger Grocery and Baking Company. Not long after, he bought a meat company and utilized them to open meat departments within the stores. That right there was the one-stop shop. People didn't have to go to the baker, then the butcher, then the grocery store. They could simply just go to Kroger. It was a setup that allowed for customer convenience, fresh food, and lower prices. Bernard Kroger would famously tell his store managers to run the price down as far as you can go so the other fellow won't slice your throat. A little aggressive, but it shows how much they competed by price. I realize that all of this happened so many years ago, but these strategies were so effective that they basically helped shape the grocery stores into what we have today. In the following years, they continued to grow by maintaining a step ahead of the competition in many different ways. In 1916, they went against the standard at the time by adopting a self-service policy where the people would walk around the store and get what they need off the shelves, as opposed to the clerk getting it or having it delivered to them. In the 1930s, they were the first grocery company to scientifically test the quality of their food. In the 1970s, they were the first to test an electronic checkout system, all things that are widely done across the...
I mean, damn, so Kroger just basically is the blueprint of every grocery store.
Hell yeah.
Or, one-stop, Walmart, Walmart is a one-stop shop.
Yeah.
They're basically the blueprint to every grocery store that we have.
Yeah.
industry today. Throughout that time, supermarkets
I worked there and didn't even know that.
were becoming more and more popular across the country, and Kroger was right there following the trend, opening these bigger, more diverse stores going back to the 1930s, which is leading me to my next reason behind their success: acquisitions. This is a big one because it's been their main method to expand their reach across the country, and it is the biggest reason that Kroger may be bigger than you realize it is. Unfortunately, there's too much to talk about here. I promise things would get very dull and confusing if I were to go through all of the details. So instead, I want to focus on 4 of their biggest acquisitions, and even though I know that sounds simple, it is still going to get a little bit complicated. See, before the 1980s, they were buying some smaller regional store chains. A quick example would be in 1960 when they bought Save-On drugstores, but things became much more aggressive starting in 1983. It was coincidentally their 100th year of business when they bought Dillon. It is a large chain of grocery and convenience stores based in Kansas that had a presence mostly in the western part of the United States. Given that Kroger was based in Ohio and still mostly found around that area going into the south, this was a perfect way for them to expand into a new part of the country. It was a $750 million deal where they agreed to mostly let the existing management control the company, an agreement that we'll continue to see, and a big reason as to why they have so many chains that are branded and controlled so differently. Now, the reason this becomes so complicated is because the industry was already consolidating for years before this, so most of Kroger's bigger acquisitions included multiple regional chains. Looking at Dillon's, in 1957, they had acquired a chain in Colorado called King Soopers, which is an odd name. Evidently, the person who started it was named Lloyd King, and then he happened to be a fan of the Archie comics, where apparently they exclaim the word super quite a bit. I don't know. In 1966, they acquired a chain in Missouri called Gerb's. 3 years later, it was another chain in Colorado called City Market. Then in 1972, they bought a chain in Arizona called Fry's. And
Speaking of the Note video, remember, because I was like, what the hell is Fry's? That was the guys. That was the store that they were shopping at.
Oh, shit.
To get the cameras. And I'm like, what is Fry's?
Nice wordplay.
interesting side note about Fry's is that the name comes from Charles Fry. When he sold it to Dillon's for $14 million, he gave $1 million to each of his 3 sons, and then a little later, they would pool that money together to open Fry's electronics store that you may have been to before they shut down last year. Anyway, with this deal, all of those grocery stores were now under the ownership of Kroger. There is going to be a big gap in time on my list, because in the later part of the 1980s, partially because of all of these various stores that were separately branded and easily separated, Kroger became a likely target for a hostile takeover. To prevent that from happening, they restructured things and gave their shareholders this costly $40 per share dividend to convince them to hold on to their investment, which did prevent the takeover, but since the dividend was mostly funded through debt, they wisely chose to hold off on any further acquisitions until they could pay off a reasonable portion of it. But once they did gain some stability, they came back with the acquisitions in a big way. The next one on my list is so much bigger than the first one. It was in 1999 when they bought Fred Meyer in a stock deal along with assumption of debt that was valued at more than $12 billion. Fred Meyer was based in Portland, and again, a big motivation behind the deal was to strengthen their presence in the West, along with economies of scale. It's estimated that the deal saved them $380 million in the first year. But again, it's not that straightforward. Fred Meyer had recently been growing as well. Just 2 years earlier, they had paid $700 million for a Utah-based chain called Smith's Food and Drug, who also included other store chains in the Southwest that they had bought, but that is going too many layers deep. But I will mention that once Kroger took control, they took the Smith stores in Arizona and converted them into the Fry's chain that they had received from the previous acquisition. Is everyone still following this? Fred Meyer had also recently bought a Washington-based chain called Quality Food Centers and a California-based chain called Ralph's that I always associate with the opening scene of The Big Lebowski. Fred Meyer was also one of the country's biggest retailers of jewelry, owning multiple chains of stores, including Fred Meyer's Jewelers. So, there you go. As of 1999, all of that was also brought under the control of Kroger. In the years that followed, there were some smaller, more isolated acquisitions, including Payless Supermarkets, JC Food Stores, and Bakers. But the next major one that qualifies for my list skips ahead to 2014 when they bought Harris Teeter. This one is thankfully much more straightforward. It was a chain of over 200 grocery stores based in North Carolina that cost Kroger $2.5 billion. Then, finally, the last one on my list happened just 1 year later when they bought Roundy Supermarkets in an $800 million deal that included over 150 stores. If you're from Wisconsin, you may recognize Pick and Save, Cops, or Metro Market, all part of the deal, or if you're from south of the border in Illinois, you may have been to one of their 34 Mariano stores. I feel like I should mention that shortly after, Kroger started an initiative called Restock Kroger that involved, among other things, lowering overall cost, investing in technology, and raising the average wages of their 500,000 employees. As far as I could tell, it's been mostly successful. Additionally, they sold all of their convenience stores in 2018 for $2.2 billion and put most of that money toward their stock repurchase program, so that is where most of their efforts have been recently. Let me know in the comments, are any of these stores in your area? Given that they have coverage in most of the country at this point, I'm thinking that most people have been to at least one of these. Also, what do you think of the Kroger company and how it's evolved from the days of Bernard Kroger himself? It's definitely one of the bigger and, in my opinion, more inspirational success stories. So any thoughts you have about Kroger or any brand company, most stores in...
So, what do you think?
I do remember when I was
Working here?
moved up to be the new hire trainer.
Mm-hmm.
I do remember some of the stores that they had purchased because they, one of the things I had to talk about in the class was the fact that Kroger did actually, in fact, own jewelry stores, and that you could actually use your Kroger card at these other places to get the discount. So I did know about that, but I knew that they had owned a few of these, not all of them, but I definitely recall Fred Meyer's and Dillon's. So, yeah.
I have never heard of any of those places. Yeah, I think that's what it was.
Okay. Well, this was easy.
Yeah.
All right, Colliders. So, of course, if you enjoyed this reaction, go ahead and hit the like button. And don't forget to subscribe because, of course, we're coming back with more of these. If you want to check out Company Man's phenomenal YouTube channel for yourself or watch this video on your lonesome, the links to the description, these videos will be in the description, along with where you can follow me and the official JW on our respective platforms.
Later, y'all.
Bye, y'all.